Dr. Bill Deagle and I'm back, and our special guest is Cliff Harris, our nuclear expert, talking about the latest disaster that's brewing in Japan with Fukushima. Chris, tell us the latest of what's happening, and notice you just sent me this morning that precipitated me doing a panic call to get your latest update on what's really going on there with not only the burning of hundreds of millions of tons of trash, but the coming typhoon and the planned evacuation of over 1 million Japanese.
Well, that sort of caught my eye, you know, when I was scrolling through trying to get a decent update, and I had to check it several different ways because I couldn't believe my eyes. It looks like Typhoon Oroki, I think that's how you pronounce it, is heading right probably by tomorrow, you know, because they said, see, that was yesterday. It's 48 hours, they said, so it's got to be by tomorrow, or even this evening, my time. So a huge typhoon looks like is going to strike in the Fukushima prefect, and that will cause a lot of problems there.
Yeah, not problems at the least. They started mobilizing trash, and
I don't know how they're going to do that.
The last 3 weeks they've been burning the trash of the debris from the buildings. They've been doing a thing called averaging, where they take very radioactive debris containing lots of cesium-137 plus other isotopes, averaging with less radioactive debris, and say, well, it's okay to burn it, which is against international law and the IAEA and the International Court of Justice, and they need to be sued. So TEPCO and the prefecture and the other politicians there that think it's okay to burn radioactive trash need to be strung up. They need to be sued. They need to be put in jail. It's a criminal activity. It's a world obscenity. And then on top of that, they send people back to radioactive homes and communities where they are getting significantly exposed, not even having dosimetry cards on them, and children are literally blowing their noses and getting bloody noses, and people are getting massive accumulative toxic overdose that's going to cause extreme problems with the population of this area of northern Japan, plus the offshore effect that Dr. Busby's talked about, pushing the radioisotopes at least 5 kilometers in, will infect with radioisotopes the entire eastern seaboard of Japan. They're also poisoning us here in America, poisoning the Europeans, and here on the west coast of the United States, they've stated from reports the last few weeks that we are more radioactive than western coast of Japan, which means we're significantly being slowly boiled in radioisotopes from the prefecture of Fukushima, caused by the inaction not only of the Japanese but the international community to deal with this disaster.
Well, you remember, you know, one of the things I was reading was it was actually I tried to get several news sources so I can find out what's credible or not. And this goes back to a Bloomberg news article, a business article of just today, and it talks about thousands of gallons of water from the rain itself is getting into the plant and it's causing radioactive runoff. Now, I did the due diligence and pulled out from April 28th, something, I put together a list for you, some of the things that I would like to see done, and one of them was construct a cover over the plant so that you don't get rainwater, and you thought I was nuts. You said, Chris is nuts.
Yeah,
because,
we're both thinking along the same nuts thing, but I was thinking more of a Kevlar spider silk tent, not a solid structure, because a solid structure won't deal with small hydrogen explosions or release. You need something with a high tensile strength that won't blow apart in little pieces, like this so-called framework structure they're setting up that's not going to withhold a hydrogen-based explosion or a critical event that actually will cause a mini-nuclear type of explosion as well.
Well, or a typhoon for that matter. It's not going to hold.
Or a typhoon, yeah, exactly. A tent would withstand a typhoon, but a solid structure will not.
Yeah, and so, you know, that was one of my main concerns. You know, you would ask, what do you do to minimize the waste? And I said, you got to stop clean water from getting in. And it looks like that they're actually trying to do that. I don't know what took them so long, but that would have been a priority of mine to recover the place, because anything clean you add to the contaminated plant is going to come out. And the article discusses cracks in the structure of Unit 1, 2, and 3. And 4, because even the spent fuel pool is leaking. So, you know, it made good sense to me to go ahead and cover that thing up somehow. And they're working towards it. But now the typhoon's here. It does rain in Japan, and unfortunately, that's what we're seeing right now. So, I don't know. Well, let's see. What was I? Where was I?
Here, let me go over to some of the key issues here. North America, we have increased. We had a really summer out of hell. We had extreme weather to put a number of nuclear plants, and we can go down through the list. We had the plants in Tennessee, Virginia, all over the place in jeopardy. In the central United States, along the Mississippi River, from flooding. We had all kinds of events, and we've had this North Annan reactor that exceeded their reactor safety limits, so they can't restart it because they don't know if it's structurally sound. So, and that was caused by an earthquake, which is really unusual in that area, so they don't even know what caused it. The fact is, we have not, in a public way, dealt with the entire committee of the NRC moving forward with immediate plans to increase safety standards. Power backup is very minimal. They're edging it up. Well, we'll go from 4 hours to 8 hours. Maybe we'll do this or that. They're putting what I call, lipstick on a pig. They're whitewashing the situation, trying to think that if they just cosmetically deal with it, the public will forget it. And that's not good policy, is it?
Not at all. Arnie Gunderson had a quote saying that the NRC is the agency that's most responsible for doing nothing.
And the IAEA. The IAEA were responsible in Japan as well because they whitewashed the issues and wouldn't speak about it. And then we had corporations like General Electric, Mr. Imelt, who said, we're going to get Fukushima and the Sendai reactors back up. I'm thinking, why not? This guy is obviously not with it at all, is he?
Not at all. And I listen to, it seems like the NRC's got like an A team and a B team, and the meeting that I listened to today was, I think that was like more their A team. Today there was a public meeting held, and it was for the industry's take on the recommendations for Fukushima and what they would do. And I could talk for a really long time on that because it was a very interesting meeting, and a lot of it came down to the recommendations that my team. In fact, today I talked about this before, that there was a special project. There was about 20 of us in the country that were capable of doing this, and we went out and to different power plants and said, what would you do if a monstrous event happened at a power plant like that, right? And Joe was one of the team members, and some of the other guys were other team members on it. These guys actually, they were all watching the meeting. They all gave me a call today, which is pretty funny, or some emails, and they said, hey, look at that. They're using our recommendations. So that's nice to know that they're using it a little late because they had those recommendations for a long time, and they're kind of arguing and gnashing teeth over whether they're going to make them requirements or not.
Well, what we need to do is we almost need to have a preemptive grand jury indictments of the incompetence of what's going on right now. Because if we don't have some kind of special Senate or congressional committee with open hearings that go on CPAC, I think we're in dire straits. I think some extreme weather event in the next year, earthquake, tsunami, God knows what, is going to happen, and we're going to see a good chunk of the United States become a nuclear wasteland, like the zone of alienation around Chernobyl. It's 100 and some thousand square miles. And you only live there if you're a mutant mouse.
Well, there was the meeting last week, and I definitely listened in on that one. It's a public meeting. All your listeners can just go ahead and get it. And right. There was one fellow in there, it actually stands out, a fellow named Dr. Thomas Cochran. He was an independent look at the North Anna plant, and very interesting fellow. He was like a crusty old codger that he knew his stuff. There's no question about it. And he didn't hold back either. And if he's worth a listen, and I can definitely send you some clips from him. But he said, you guys in the NRC ought to tell these guys what they need to do. And these guys need to do it. And that was the bottom line. He's my new hero for sure.
Absolutely. Keep that thought. We'll be back in a moment, Chris. We need to talk about what's going on in Japan now when we return. They plan on evacuating 1 million Japanese from the storm, the typhoon coming into the nuclear Fukushima prefecture. And we're back with Chris Harris. We're dealing with a population literally sitting in the gun sights of a typhoon coming toward Japan. The western United States is being slowly roasted with radioactivity, and Canada heading toward Europe, and it's dumping all over the entire northern hemisphere. The problem is that we don't have a level of alert by the government officials or the politicians or the regular snooze. They call it the put people to sleep. What's going to happen when these structures, like we mentioned on the break here, that reactor number 3, you can see the open sore of the wet well actually blown off into the side, so there's a nuclear explosion that occurred there. We have up to 60 kilometers away plutonium particles, some of them fairly large, that were found. We've got 1 million people that are going to try to evacuate in the face of this typhoon that's going to irradiate them. And they've now reported 3 weeks ago, that the radiation levels in the western United States and Canada are higher than in western Japan. I mean, if people are alarmed...
I'm not surprised. I mean, this is... I was alarmed by this event. I said, I don't even know how bad it's going to get, but it's certainly not going to get better by itself. You know, the makeshift systems, and we talked about you're going to have to make a makeshift system to mimic all the functions that were lost due to the equipment that was lost, have been reconstructed somewhat. They're not really working 100%, but basically what they do is they take water, they try to reclaim as much as they can. They run it through filters, which filter out the cesium and everything else, and uranium and particles and everything else, which become really, really contaminated themselves and become hot spots themselves. And now you're going to subject this flimsy system to a typhoon. It wasn't built to handle that. This is a temporary makeshift measure. It's a flimsy system that you're putting together. I mean, even if it works great for a while, what do you do when you subject it to something that's coming right now, or aftershocks or anything else? Stuff's not seismically built. So you could have they're using flexible hoses, basically. I mean, they're high quality flexible hoses, but they break. And you go ahead and have a typhoon come by, and it'll just break apart one of the flexible hoses. Now you have all this runoff running straight into the side.
And you also have to look at what the yard is. There's hundreds of these little containers with hoses connecting them.
Right.
And they're loaded up with radioactive water, so radioactive that if they ever burst, anybody walking by them for a matter of a minute or two would die virtually almost instantly. And this water is going to be released into the Pacific. It's going to be mobilized into the air. It's going to, like, we're facing something that in some ways may be actually worse than the original explosion of Fukushima.
Well, if that breaks, what happens is it's a direct path coming from the inside the reactor of units 1, 2, and 3 just a straight shot to the sea. There's nothing to stop it.
The sea and the air, of course, when the typhoon picks it up, it's going to mobilize into the atmosphere, and those plumes of radiation are going to come directly toward us in North America.
Right.
Why isn't this idiot president have a mobilization force like the Manhattan Project going over, taking over control of the situation, building a spider silk Kevlar tent over it, building an undercorium catcher and moats upon moats around it so it doesn't get out to the sea, doesn't get under into the groundwater table, doesn't create giant, what I call superheated radioactive jets that can go tens of kilometers away from the Fukushima site. And we now know that this situation is no end in future. In fact, TEPCO, the latest reports from the Otakon is that 3 days after it, they were literally ready to walk because there were other, quote, black projects going on the site, which means they're developing new types of exotic nuclear weapons. They were doing all kinds of other experiments and things, and the TEPCO people were literally saying, we're going to walk. We're not even going to stay around here. We're just going to leave this nuclear sore, and these plants just go critical and explode, go China syndrome. Can you talk about that for a minute? Because when I saw those reports, I think, this is a lot worse than I even imagined.
Yeah, well, the TEPCO walking, and you actually told me about that, and I looked it up and said, yep, that was one of my biggest fears. I said, why shouldn't they walk? Why shouldn't they just say, well, I remember a long time ago, I said, nobody really knows what to do about this. There isn't anybody that really knows, and I still stand by that. And I said, we're way outside the box right now, and based on that information that I definitely verified that TEPCO had, they wanted to pull up and run. They didn't know what to do either. And now you ask about a response organization. Well, oddly enough, just last week, part of another Fukushima meeting was that a recommendation was that they were going to have some kind of a global kind of a task force that would be able to have trained people to come in and respond to